Good afternoon, everybody. You are very welcome to this webinar, which is going to explain to you exactly what's required in order to become a fellow of IMechE. Haven't got cameras on today, unfortunately, so just to introduce myself, I'm Sandra Mulligan. I'm a business development manager with the institution based in Glasgow, and I'm part of the business development team here at IMechE. And we spend all our time coaching and guiding applicants through the process of gaining professional registration. Pre-COVID, we spent all our time out and about on visits to industry, to universities, to colleges, to training providers, etc. That's all changed with COVID, and we've had to adapt all our events really to doing them online. I'm joined by my colleague Lara today. Lara is looking after the chat today, so she is going to share relevant links with you in the chat and also deal with questions as they come up. And then we'll have an open forum question and answer session at the end. So when you're posing a question, just check to see that you're either sending it to Lara, myself, or to everybody. If you're comfortable with it, that it's a question that you're quite happy to share with everybody, you can just check the all attendees box. So just to be aware of that. And I know many of you are mentors as well as planning on applying for fellowship. So just to mention, the range of workshops that we provide in the BD team are detailed on the webinar hub on the website. Just included a screen grab of that today just to show you where you can find that information, because we're updating and adding to the content all the time. So if you have an idea for an event that isn't already covered by our team, please do let us know. We'll be delighted to hear from you. So today is all about fellowship and explaining to you exactly what's involved in gaining fellowship with IMechE. So my plan is to give you an overview of the requirements and also give you some ideas of how you can demonstrate to us that you meet those requirements. And I'll also show you the application form and what we look for in that application form. And as I said, if you have any questions or queries, please feel free to post them in the chat box as we're going through the session. So fellowship is the most senior grade of membership offered by the institution. And our fellows are typically CEng, IMechE or EngTech members of the institution. And fellowship really recognises the contribution that has been made by those individuals to their profession and their chosen area of expertise. And the last time we did one of these sessions, I was asked in the questions, how many fellows do we have, etc. So I've included some stats today. Currently, about 18% of our membership hold fellowship. So out of our 45,000 registrants, just under 7,000 are fellows of IMechE. About 3.5% are female, and typically about 200 new fellows are elected every year to the institution. So if you're a professional engineer working in a senior role with significant autonomy and responsibility, you can apply to become a fellow. Now, I often get asked by applicants who are consultants, because I'm self-employed as a consultant, does that exclude me? Absolutely not. It really depends on you demonstrating to us that you meet the qualities. And if you do that in your application form, you will be successful. And there's lots of help and guidance and support available to you in that we can review your draft application before it's submitted. And the slide pack today will be available after the session so that you can refer back to it and draw on it in terms of guiding you through the applications process. So what does it mean to be a fellow? Firstly, it's important to highlight that an application for fellow is not a reassessment of your competence. Your competence has already been assessed when you applied for EngTech or IMechE or CEng. So your competence is not being reassessed. What we're looking at is if you meet the fellow qualities. And the way we've defined the process allows anybody who believes they can meet the qualities to demonstrate to us that they can be elected as a fellow of the institution. So in your application form, we're looking for you to identify your evidence of CPD, of taking on increasing responsibilities, your commitment to the profession, and how you've actually put that into practice in your own workplace. What are the benefits? There's a number of benefits. I think it's fair to say that the benefits mean different things to different people, but one of the main reasons why we encourage people to gain fellowship is that the postnominals are recognised throughout the world as a mark of excellence. And when you apply for fellowship, the assessors will take a balanced view on your entire career since you were awarded professional registration. But I think it's also important to highlight that you, as the applicant, have to show the assessors where you feel that you've demonstrated the fellow qualities. So that's very important to highlight at the outset. But we need fellows as an organisation to influence the direction of the institution, and we also need fellows to serve on senior committee roles, elected to the council, trustee board, etc. We also need fellows to help us raise the profile of engineering and encourage the next generation of professional engineers. We also need you to demonstrate technical expertise and help us with providing thought leadership. So when, for example, you see those reports that we produce and present to MPs, for example, or when we are required by the government to give our response on various matters, having fellows on hand to help us produce the reports that we compile from the perspective of a learned society is critical. So you can be seen as a champion of industry by advocating CPD, and it also allows you to demonstrate that your skills, knowledge and expertise have been independently verified and assessed. So that's a little bit about fellowship and the benefits, but you're all here today to find out exactly what's involved, what the process is. So I'm going to just explain that to you in a little bit more detail. So there are a number of qualities which we have defined, and in order to submit a successful application to us, you need to be able to show to us that you meet the 5 essential qualities, which I will go through with you in a moment. You also need to be able to show to us that you've met one of the desirable qualities. There are 2 desirable qualities which we've defined. And you also need to show to us that you've met one optional quality. There are 3 optional qualities. So the ones that are absolutely critical are the 5 essential qualities. If you can only demonstrate one of the desirable qualities, you can supplement it by providing information of meeting one of the optional qualities. But like I said earlier, it's very important that you as an applicant highlight to the assessors where you meet the requirements. I often get asked, what about people who've retired? Yes, if you've retired but you've continued with CPD, you can be suitable. There's no age limit or age requirement. And there's no minimum requirement either. It very much depends on you as an individual and what you've achieved. The youngest person who was elected as a fellow of the institution was under 30 years old, and I believe the oldest person that we have on our books registered as a fellow is 93. So that gives you an indication of the age range. So it's very much what you've been doing during your career after being awarded your professional registration. So the essential qualities that we look for, just go through them very briefly now before going over them in a little bit more detail. So you need to be able to show to us that you hold a position of senior authority or autonomy in your field. So you must be able to show us that you're regularly taking decisions or making judgments that are not essentially dictated by established rules or procedures, and which have a significant importance in relation to the company, the university or organisation that you work at. You need to be able to show to us that you've got demonstrable leadership qualities. Like to see how you've been using your initiative and that others follow your lead. You need to be able to show to us that you've been influencing policy and strategy making decisions in either a business or technical environment. The reality, I think it's fair to say, is that most applicants have been doing it in both senses. You sometimes get people who are technical experts who apply, but most people tend to have a mixture of both technical and business experience on their application, again, depending very much on their career path. You need to be able to show to us that you've been promoting the engineering profession to young engineers and potential engineers. And we're looking really for direct evidence of this. So In some cases, it's very obvious through the role. If, for example, you're in an academic teaching role, that would show straight away that the job requirements, and that's a significant feature of the job requirement. But in other cases, you do need to make sure that it's explicit. So you need to highlight to us how you've been doing that. And you also need to have a structured approach to CPD. So we're looking for clear evidence of CPD. For example, papers that you've had published, that's not a requirement, it's just one way of showing to us that you can meet the requirement. The CPD needs to be appropriate to your personal career goals and that it's been planned. That's what we're looking for really, that you haven't suddenly decided, oh yikes, I need to start doing some CPD because I want to become a fellow. It's something you've been thinking about and you've kept a record of what you've been doing. And then the optional qualities, that you're responsible for budget and the associated risks, that you've got a significant range of fundamental principles and complex technical issues across a wide and often unpredictable variety of contexts, that you're actively involved in the development and application of new technologies in engineering and related areas at a senior level. Generally, what I advise people to do, because a lot of applicants that approach looking for advice have got a lot of information. Bear in mind there's a word count limit on this application. A lot of people have a lot of information from their career that they can include to meet the essential qualities. If you've got additional information that you can use it to populate the optional boxes and the desirable boxes of the application form, just to make sure that you've shared with the assessors anything that you feel is relevant and significant in your application for fellowship. Now, if you go onto our website, you can look at the profiles of a number of fellows, just to give you an indication of some of the people who have successfully applied for fellowship with us. But bear in mind, by speaking to your own network, so people within your own company or organisations, or people that you know perhaps through the divisions and groups or local area committees, you can also speak with other people who have successfully been through the process. So that can be worth having a look at as well, just to give you some ideas, some food for thought, etc., in terms of populating your own application form. The one document, though, that I would really encourage all of you to read are the fellow guidance notes, which are on our website. So they cover the qualities and the requirements in a lot more detail. So before you start to write your application form, please have a read through these, and please use this as an opportunity to summarize, if you like, or do a little bit of a brain dump in terms of what you've been doing to date and how what you've been doing to date may map against the requirements. There's also a sample completed application form on the website, which again I would encourage you to have a look through, because it's laid out following the guidance notes and using the writing style that we look for. Same as when you applied for IMechE or CMechE or indeed EngTech, you need to make sure you write in the first person. It's all about you and what you've achieved since you were awarded professional registration with IMechE. So I'm going to take a look now at each of the essential qualities and give you some ideas as to how the work you've been doing may map against these requirements. Now, the first essential quality is that you need to be able to show to us that you hold a position of senior responsibility and or autonomy in your particular field. Now, the way the slide is laid out, it looks as though the evidence is broken along two separate columns, that you have one or the other. That's not in fact the case. In reality, most applicants have a mixture of both. So if we start off first of all with E1, so what have you been doing in terms of what managerial or supervisory responsibility do you have? Are you a senior department manager? Or are you perhaps a technical authority? Tell us about what you've been doing. And please put it into context. So don't assume that the assessor will know your organisation, the nature of its business, etc. You want to write the application in such a way the assessor picks it up, reads it, and immediately says, yes, this person is working at fellowship level, rather than sending in an application where the assessor thinks, looking at the job description, this person could be working at fellowship, but they're just not giving us enough information here. So do bear in mind, it's your responsibility to highlight how you meet these qualities. So think about it carefully and use the word count wisely. So try and include facts and figures that put what you're saying into context. So if you manage a manufacturing base, for example, is it 1 or is it 10 bases? Are those bases local? Are they national? Are they international? How many people report into you, for example? What's the size of budget that you're responsible for? Do you perhaps manage the capital budget? Do you perhaps manage the direct labour budget? If you're working at a university, are you a member of Senate at the university, for example? This is just to give you some ideas as to how work you've been doing since you were awarded registration can map against the fellow qualities. And if you think you're ready to apply, that's great. If you think you're not quite ready, well then I would urge you to use the CPD tools available through IMechE to start recording your development so that in due course you will be able to apply. And do bear in mind, we look for about 400 words for each of these requirements. So you don't have a huge amount of space to play with. So you do need to be careful in terms of describing your achievements to us. So E1, you need to be able to show to us you're in a position of senior responsibility. E2, you need to be able to show to us that you've got demonstrable leadership qualities. And you can see on the screen at the moment some of the areas where you might have expertise in. Additional things you might want to factor in could be if you're on any regional boards or if you're on any government employer groups, development agencies, business councils, etc. That's good evidence that you're a leader. Do you perhaps chair any of these groups? If you're working in academia, have you perhaps developed the postgraduate programs portfolio? You could also refer to publications and your grants record if you work at university. What we're looking for here really is clear evidence that you took the lead and initiative and others followed your lead. That's what we're looking for here in terms of E2. So what have you been doing and how might what you've been doing map against this requirement? The third essential quality is you need to be able to show to us that you have influenced policy and strategy making decisions in either a technical or business environment. It might in fact be both, depending on your career history. So have you, for example, set up a new research and development facility? How was that achieved? Did you need to perhaps secure funding in order to set up that facility? Tell us perhaps how you went about securing that funding. If you're at university, you could perhaps tell us about how you chair the postgraduate teaching committee, or you could be a member of your school's management group. So if you're in academia and you're talking about, for example, the school's management group or the postgraduate teaching committee, try and quantify it by talking about the number of academic staff, the number of undergrads, the number of postgrads, the number of taught and research students that you're dealing with. So what we like to see here is that the applicant has influence over the policy or the strategy adopted by their employer, or if you're a consultant, it could be by your client. So you might not have direct control, but there should be evidence of significant input. So for example, you devised a proposal which was then accepted by your client or colleagues. So just to give you some ideas as to what might count as meeting essential quality E3. If you've acted as an expert witness, for example, that is good evidence of showing to us that you're a technical specialist and that you're regarded as being an expert witness by a barrister. So lots of different ways in which you could show to us that you've met E3. So have a think about what you've been doing and how you might be able to meet this requirement. E4 is that you need to be able to show to us that you've had a structured approach to CPD. Now, I would have to say I meet a lot of applicants that say to me, oh, Sandra, I haven't really been keeping very detailed records of what I've been doing. And an applicant like that frequently has to go back through a number of annual appraisals because typically most engineers do CPD, but perhaps aren't very good at recording it. So you might need to dig back through copies of old appraisals to collate together all the evidence of the CPD that you've been doing. So, structured approach for CPD. Have you gained further qualifications? Have you done an MBA, for example? Not saying that you need to do that, but that might be something that you've done. Are you mentoring? Have you helped set up an MPDS scheme or a supported registration scheme within your organisation? Are you involved with the IMechE committees, divisions, groups? Do you act as a race marshal at Formula Student, for example? Are you doing other charity work outside of the workplace? Don't forget that work you're doing outside of the workplace or activities outside of the workplace are directly relevant here once you can show to us that the skills are transferable. So I've mentioned MPDS mentoring. You could be mentoring, for example, in another context. You might be mentoring school children. You might be working as the school governor. Are you involved or do you work with the local or national manufacturing advisory service? So we've the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service here in Scotland, for example. I know there are other regional activities which perform a similar function. Are you involved with those, for example? An applicant I was working with recently talked about work he was doing as a lean expert within his own organisation. He did a talk at his local university explaining how his organisation had implemented lean principles and adapted them to suit their working environment. That was a good, solid example of a piece of CPD. Have you perhaps set up a new in-house training centre? Have you perhaps done an international leadership development program? Have you had papers published? Have you presented at larger conferences or seminars? So some ideas there as to what can count as CPD activities. Do please bear in mind this is not an exhaustive list. This is really just to give you some ideas as to what could count as CPD activities. And bear in mind the IMechE approach to CPD is that you need to carry out activities that are relevant to you and your personal development. And everybody will have different career aspirations, goals, ambitions, etc. So we don't dictate to you the amount of CPD you need to do. It's up to you to choose activities that are relevant to you. So you could, for example, if you're going to be seconded to do a piece of work abroad, you might choose to learn the language of that country, and that would be a good piece of evidence of CPD because it's relevant to your career path and the trajectory it's on. And finally, E5 is the promotion of the engineering profession to young engineers and potential engineers. So there may be some crossover here between work that you've done for E4 and E5. So we're looking for direct evidence of this, please. And you can see some examples on the screen at the moment as to what may count as evidence of meeting E5. You can see mentoring is featuring strongly there. If you're new to mentoring, on the IMechE website, for example, there are mentor training modules that you can do in your own time, over an hour, but there are lots of resources for new mentors out there as well. Have you, for example, set up a design challenge in partnership with the local school? Are you a STEM ambassador? What STEM work have you been doing recently? Do you work with primary engineer? Are you a school governor? And again, as I said earlier, where E5 is a function of the role, if you're doing academic teaching, for example, it's going to be obvious that that's a significant feature of your job. But in other cases, you really do need to be explicit. And it's something that you're actively doing. So hopefully that will give you some ideas as to how what you've been doing can map against essential quality E5. Moving on then to look at the desirable quality. So as I said earlier, there are 5 desirable qualities and all applicants need to provide us with a maximum of about 400 words demonstrating how they meet the essential qualities. And then you need to show to us that you've met the desirable qualities or the desirable and one optional. So the first desirable quality is that you have highly specialist knowledge in a specific area of engineering. And some ideas on the screen at the moment as to how you could show to us that you've met D1. So what we're looking for here is that your expertise has been developed significantly beyond that of a typical engineer. That you, for example, are the go-to person in your organization that people come to if they've got queries relating to CFD, whatever your area of expertise is. And in terms of evidence of being an expert, do you perhaps represent your organization or industry at one of the various industry standardization bodies that are out there? Are you involved in the societies that are relevant to your industry sector? So I do a lot of work with engineers up in Aberdeen, for example, and in Aberdeen there are lots and lots of engineering societies and organisations that are active. So for example, there's the Society of Underwater Technology, the Society of Petroleum Engineers, etc. So if you're active with IMechE, that's great, but you may also be active with other societies and organisations that are relevant to your area of expertise. Tell us what you've been doing, please. Has your work been published in any peer-reviewed journals, for example? That would be good, clear evidence of your expertise. So that's D1, and some ideas as to how you could show to us that you've addressed D1 during the course of your career since gaining registration. D2 is that you have technical or engineering resource management and or personnel management and development. So what we're looking for here is that you have significant management responsibilities for staff and or other technical activities. You could, for example, be a technical specialist who's working alone. You could be a project manager for a project or projects of significant size and complexity. You could show to us that you have a good, strong track record of doing that kind of work. That could meet that requirement as well. Again, you can see expert witnesses coming up here too. O1 is that you have responsibility for budget and the associated risks. So it could be that you have significant involvement in setting a substantial budget. And O2 is that you have the application of a significant range of fundamental principles and complex technical issues across a wide and often unpredictable variety of contexts. And the key words here really are significant and complex techniques. So you might, for example, be the troubleshooting expert within your organization. You might be the person who's responsible for negotiating and dealing with unions. You might be responsible for writing complex specifications. So some ideas there as to how you could show you've met O2. So that, I hope, has given you some food for thought as to how what you've been doing may map against the requirements. Let's now go on and take a look at the application form and just show to you how it's broken down and what we will be looking for from you as an applicant. Oh, sorry, I forgot O3, my mistake. So the active development and application of new technologies in engineering and related areas at a senior level. Sorry, my mistake there. And you can see some examples here as to how you could show to us that you've achieved O3, that you manage the R&D budget, that you perhaps identify new R&D projects. You might work with universities. For example, you might be involved with the local knowledge transfer partnership. So what we're looking for here is that you have a significant role in the development of new technologies rather than just being a team member. So I jumped the gun there earlier. Now to get back on track, we're going to now take a look at the application process so that you know exactly what to expect when you go online and have a look at the application form. So when you go online, there's two versions of the application form available. There's an online version and there's an editable PDF. So while they look a little bit different, the content is exactly the same. And the first part of the application is just your personal details. So that goes through your personal details, your employment details, your industry classification, and how you'd like us to keep in touch with this. And as I said earlier, it's available as either an online version or an editable PDF. So this will show you what the online version of the application form looks like. So this is pretty straightforward to complete. It's just your personal details, etc. Pretty straightforward. Industry classification really relates to your area of expertise, just so that we can match you up with an appropriate assessor. So that's what we look for here. So you need to specify, well, you can choose up to 3 fields that best describe your current area of engineering activity. So if, for example, it's quite some time between you being awarded professional registration and submitting your application for fellowship, and you've worked in a variety of different industry sectors, you can select up to 3 that best describe your current area of engineering activities. And don't forget, when you start to do the online version of the application form, remember to save your progress regularly, please. This is just a staying in touch button that I mentioned earlier. So this is what you need to tick in order to make sure you receive regular updates from us. I'd encourage you to go online into your own member record to make sure that this is now accurate, because I've noticed with the GDPR requirements, some members have ticked that they don't want to hear from us and in actual fact miss out on information that's relevant to them. So it's always useful to go in and check your preferences to make sure that they're accurate and up to date for what you need. So that part of the application form is pretty straightforward. This is then when we start to get into looking for more details. We look for your career history and your organisation chart. So here in the career history section, you're allowed up to 800 words. You can see I've just highlighted there. So 800 words is not a huge amount of space, so make sure you use your words wisely here. So what you want to do here is tell us what you've been doing, what you've achieved since you were elected as an EngTech, IMechE or CMechE member of the institution. So 800 words is the maximum. And I would encourage you to try and use all of that word count, because what you want to do is make sure that you're explaining to the assessors clearly and concisely your current role. Please don't fall into the trap of assuming that because you work for a large blue chip organization that the assessors will be familiar with the organization, the nature of its business, its size, business activities, etc. So I would encourage you to use those words wisely, and indeed you might find if it's quite some time between being elected and applying for registration that you find it quite a challenge to stay within 800 words. That is quite a strict word count. It's 800 words maximum, please. And some other tips to share with you today is to make sure that you write it in the first person. That can still be a challenge for some applicants. Make sure that you write out all your acronyms fully, please, before you use the abbreviated version. And again, don't assume that the assessors will be familiar with the jargon that you use. I often find with applicants, because their sponsor is frequently from the same place of work, and perhaps because you and both your sponsors are familiar with the language that you use in the application form, you forget to sort of step back and into the assessor's shoes and think that, well, actually they're from a totally different industry sector and they don't understand this jargon. So please do spell it out clearly. You can include photos or drawings if you wish as an appendix, but the goal here really is that they get a clear understanding of your career history and your current role without needing to resort to Google. That's something I've been sharing a lot with applicants recently. The goal is that the assessors can read your application, understand what you've achieved without having to go online and Google the terms that you've used or Google the company name to find out about it and the nature of its business. You want to present your case clearly and concisely to the assessors so that they can see immediately that you're working at fellow level. So here is a copy of Part A from the exemplar online, and as you can see, this applicant has just explained to us what they've been doing. They've explained to us the nature of the company, its business, what they're doing, the turnover. That's the kind of facts and figures, the factual information that we like to see in the description of your current role. We also ask you to include an organisation chart, please. And again, a lot of applicants send the organisation chart into us and then neglect to highlight where they sit within the organisation. So please do make sure that you highlight where you sit within the organisation. If you work as a consultant, it might be more appropriate to include an interactions chart. And that would be where you have you, for example, at the center of the organization, and you've got arrows out detailing the names and titles of people that you liaise with on a regular basis, perhaps at the clients where you do business or clients that you liaise with. So again, going into the next part is what we've really been talking about early, evidence of how you meet the fellow qualities. So as I said earlier, good idea to sit and have a good read through the guidance notes and the exemplar before you start to before you start to compose and write your own application form, please. And the fellow qualities are all detailed in the application form again. So you can see there it's a summary of what I've explained to you earlier in a little bit more detail. So it's very much about what you have been doing in terms of how you've been successful, where you've perhaps introduced a new technology, where you've pushed forward the frontiers of knowledge, all that good stuff. That's what we'd like to see here. And there's 400 words allowed for each of the requirements. So that's where I was saying earlier, if you've lots and lots of evidence for all of the essential qualities, you can add them into the desirable and the optional boxes. So don't try and go over the word count, just include additional information in the desirable and the optional boxes. So there's nothing to stop you completing all of the boxes in the application form. And indeed, that's something I encourage people who've got a long career history to draw on, because you want to give the assessors as much clear evidence that you meet the requirements as you possibly can, please. So you can see with the online version of the application form, one of the advantages of using the online version is that you can't submit it unless it's fully complete. And believe it or not, one of the things that slows down our colleagues in the membership department with the processing of application forms is the fact that lots of applicants send in incomplete application forms. And then there's lots of toing and froing between our staff in membership and the applicant looking for those missing pieces of information. So one of the advantages of using the online version of the application form is that you can't submit it unless it's fully complete. So as I said earlier, we recommend that you complete all of the qualities, please. Maximum of 400 words per fellow quality. And very important that you use language that identifies your seniority, please. So you need to suspend your natural modesty, because this is all about you and what you've done and what you've achieved. So try and use language where possible, like I've led, I've directed, I influenced, I'm responsible for, I've recommended, etc. That's the kind of language that we'd be looking for, please. Also important as well to include quantified examples to emphasize your level of achievement, please. So for example, numbers of direct reports, the size of budget that you've been responsible for, the risk associated, etc. So that's why it's really important in the overview of your current role that you use your word count wisely and explain to us what exactly you do. You also need to get 2 sponsors to sponsor your application form, please. At least 1 fellow with IMechE, and the second sponsor could be another fellow or your line manager. And if you use the online version of the application form, on the very last page beside the sponsor boxes, this is where you can download the application form to send it over to your sponsor for review, or indeed to send it into us for review. Believe it or not, I had an email last week from somebody who couldn't find the download button. They're getting in a bit of a tiz about that. So the download button, you can see I've got my green highlighter there to highlight it for you. So the download button is where you go to download the online version of the application form. If it's the editable PDF that you've decided to use, you can just email it on to your sponsors as appropriate. So when you've got your draft application ready, if you wish, you can send it in to us and we can do a review of it for you before you submit it. That'll just give you extra confidence going forward that it's likely that you're going to be successful. So we always get asked, what happens after I submit my application? So I write up my application, I send it into IMechE for review, I get some good feedback on it, and then I send it into membership in London to be reviewed. What will happen is that your application will be sent out to a pair of industrial advisors, and they will review your application and they will score you on each of the qualities. And they will give you scores going from 1 up to 4. So level 1 shows that you've not met the quality. Level 2 is that you're marginally short. Level 3 is that you meet the requirement. And level 4 is that you exceed the requirement. And you are looking to be awarded scores of 3 across the requirements. So across the 5 essentials, 1 desirable and 1 optional. That's what you're looking for in order to be successful. And as a result of the review that takes place of your application, the industrial advisors can recommend 5 possible outcomes. So they can recommend that you're elected as a fellow of the institution. So that means you've achieved your goal, you've been successful. Great. The second option is that it looks on paper as though you meet the requirements, but you just haven't given them enough information. You perhaps haven't given enough detail. They're not quite sure, you're borderline. They will come back to you and request supplementary information. Believe it or not, we do get some applicants who think just purely by the nature of their title and the organisation that they work for, they can immediately require, and it's very obviously put very little effort into the application process. I think it's fair to say that it's a transparent process and it's also very fair, but there are requirements that you need to meet as an applicant. So that's why we encourage you to provide as much information as possible in the format that we request. Third option is that you're invited to attend an interview. And that's again where from your job description and some of the detail you've provided, it looks as though you're working at the right level, but you just haven't given us enough information. So rather than say, no, you haven't been successful, you're given the benefit of the doubt and you're able to present your case during a face-to-face interview. The fourth option is that you are deferred with guidance. That would be that you just don't have enough evidence of meeting the requirements. It could be that you're just not in a role that's senior enough to clearly demonstrate that you meet all the requirements. So that would be defer with guidance, where you would need to perhaps go away and get additional work experience under your belt before you can be successful, or take on additional responsibilities, or perhaps do more in terms of CPD and also promoting the profession and developing the next generation of engineers. Or the fifth option is not elect. That doesn't happen very often. It generally only happens if it becomes obvious that there's more fiction than fact in the application form. But the vast majority of people who submit fellow applications are successful because of all the checks and balances that are in place, because of the fact that we will review your application before you submit it, etc. So that gives you, I hope, a good indication of the process, the requirements, and what can happen then after your application is submitted to us. So if you're ready to apply, that's great. Please do submit your draft to us for feedback. If you're not quite ready just now, if you've listened in today and you think, oh, I'm not quite ready just yet, do please keep a record and have a plan for achieving fellowship in the future. If you do want feedback on your application form, just email it over to us at bdm@imeche.org. That's our colleague Jacqueline who looks after the BDM inbox, because we're quite a big team and we tend to be busy doing webinars and stuff like this all the time. So she looks after our inbox. If you're somebody who's listening in today and you're not quite sure whether you're ready or not, you can always have a one-to-one chat with us. We regularly run membership surgeries where you have the opportunity to have a chat with us, and we can talk you through what your queries are, any detailed questions that you have, and perhaps review your CV and give you honest feedback as to whether we think you're ready or not. But if you've got any further queries after today, we're going to have a Q&A session shortly, but you can follow up with me directly after today as well. The last few slides I've put together today just show you the CPD pages and other pages of the website that you might not be familiar with. So IMechE has devised a platform that you can use to record your CPD. This page of the website anybody can have a look at, but you need to log in as a member to use the CPD tools. So those tools have been devised to reflect UK spec, and If you wish to apply for fellowship going forward, you can use the CPD tools to record your CPD matched against UK specs. That can be particularly useful if you're planning to apply for fellowship and you're just starting out on that pathway. There's also new case studies there as well, so they're useful to have a look at too. Webinar Hub I mentioned earlier. This is where details of future events that we've planned are listed. That's been updated all the time. And if you go to the membership and professional registration pages, that's where you'll find details of our events and the membership surgeries, etc. And again, if you have a look at those pages and you think, oh, they're not doing an event on X, please do get in touch with us, because we're very democratic in that we're run by the members, for the members, and your feedback really counts and matters to us. So it's only by getting feedback and engagement from our members we can improve the quality of the services and the portfolio of events that we organise. I also just wanted to draw your attention today to the YouTube channel, because there are tons of useful resources there that you may not be aware of. I have just taken a screen grab showing you some of the events that have been recorded and are on YouTube. So they cover technical events. There are events relating to developing resilience, helping you manage your mental health, STEM activities for school children, huge variety of different topics. And these are added to all the time. So they can be useful as CPD opportunities for you as a member, but also to help any developing engineers that perhaps you're mentoring, or colleagues on site that are perhaps looking for some help and guidance. And that's available 24/7 free of charge. The careers information pages on our website have also been recently updated, and we've launched a range of new pages here under the title of Experienced Engineers, and that can be particularly useful information if perhaps you're changing careers, or if you're looking for a new challenge or a new opportunity. So those pages have been very recently updated. There's lots of good, useful information there that you may not be familiar with, so just wanted to draw your attention to that today. So I do hope that's been useful in terms of giving you an overview of the process and the requirements. And I'm just going to pause now and grab a drink and hopefully have some questions from Lara. So thank you all very much for joining today. I do hope that's been useful.
Hello, can you hear me? So while Sandra just grabs her drink.
Yes, I can hear you, Lara, thanks.
Great. So Sandra, just some questions that come up quite frequently. One here is I work in an organisation that has quite a flat structure. It's quite a matrix-driven organisation, and therefore I don't have direct line management. Is that going to affect my application for fellow?
I would say not necessarily. It really depends on how you present your case to us. So while you might not be managing a team of people, you might be managing quite a significant budget, or you might be managing a budget that's very significant to your organisation. So it all depends really on how you present your case to us. I'm certainly aware of working with a number of consultants in the past year who were self-employed and were successful with their fellow applications. So I think it really comes down to how you present your case to us, taking account of the guidelines and providing as much evidence as you can in the application form as to how you meet the requirements from your own particular industry sector and the post you hold currently.
Great. And then just to follow on from that, interesting you mentioned budgets. I've got one here. Do you have to have direct responsibility for a budget?
My understanding is that you may not have to have direct responsibility, but you need to be influencing it. So again, it will depend on how you present your case. I think it's quite difficult to sort of say, to give feedback without having the full picture of the applicant, because I find frequently, and you'll probably be the same, Lara, somebody will pick out and focus in on perhaps their one weakness and talk about that and forget about all the other strengths that they have. So you might not, for example, be managing a significant budget, but you've done tons of work in terms of mentoring developing engineers and setting up a scheme in company in terms of doing work as a STEM ambassador, and you've got a huge variety of additional skills that you've developed that you can add to your application. So it really comes down to how you present your case to us in the application form. So that doesn't necessarily cause an issue. It depends on what you've got. If you didn't have that and you didn't have any of the other qualities, then of course you wouldn't be able to submit a successful application. So it really does depend on how you present your case to us. And so that's why I always recommend that people have a good read through the guidance and the exemplar before they start to draft up their application. But equally, to get in touch with us and perhaps come along to a one-to-one meeting with an up-to-date copy of a CV so that we can read through it, because often the applicant misses out something that's significant and is very relevant to their fellow application.
Yes, I definitely agree there. It's worth having a one-to-one with us because it's very much a case-by-case. And also, I have examples, I'm sure you have, Sandra, where people haven't had responsibility directly for a budget, but they've influenced the budget.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's all kinds of indicators that you can show your understanding of budgets, especially now with what's happening with the pandemic. You know, budgets are changing, factors are coming in, and you are very much part of that review process.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
I've got another one here, and you've actually mentioned about project managers. So yeah, I'm a senior project manager. I used to do the hands-on innovation, but now I'm managing kind of others who do it. Is that going to impact? How would I put that in a positive light?
Oh gosh, I think that this comes up quite a lot actually. I think that's very important how you present your case, and that you need to come at this from the perspective of, I'm not doing this now, but I have done it in the past, and I'm reviewing the work of people who are carrying out this particular activity. And because of the knowledge and experience I've built up in this sector over the years, I have the competence to assess and review the work of other people. So I'm able to give a decision, a yay or nay, as to whether something will work and can go ahead or not, even though I'm not directly carrying out the work. I have enough experience to review the work that other people have carried out.
Yeah, again, totally agree with you there, Sandra. And I have cases where people say they might not be doing the hands-on design, but they are not in a passive role, and they are still very much contributing to the output. So yeah, totally agree with that. Just some others that I get well every now and then is about I'm a retired member, or I'm about to be retired, and then also that follows on from I'm unemployed. Does that matter?
No, if you can show that you've kept your competence current and up to date by carrying out CPD activities. So again, it all comes down to what you've been doing and how you present your case to us. So if, for example, you've retired a number of years ago and you really haven't been doing anything other than play golf, for example, since you've retired, you're going to really struggle. Whereas if you've been somebody who's retired, but you have continued mentoring developing engineers, either with IMechE or another institution, if you have been doing some STEM work, if you've been reading Professional Engineer magazine, if perhaps you've been using the library to conduct some research, if you've been working as a school governor, if you've been contributing maybe to the committees that run the divisions and groups activities, if perhaps you've been involved with conferences or seminars, there's a whole variety of ways in which you can show to us that your level of competence is current and up to date, and that you have enough evidence of meeting the qualities that we look for in a fellow application. Not a problem once you've got enough evidence.
Yeah, and again, I'd agree with you on that point. Just another question about the organisation chart. So the questions that I sometimes get is, so my organisation's quite flat, or I work for a very large organisation, and it doesn't really reflect where I sit in terms of my seniority. Could I do both? Could I do the interaction chart, and can I do the organogram, which shows where I fit in?
Yes, I would encourage people to do that. Absolutely, that's not a problem at all. You want to highlight the level of responsibility that you've got, and you want to do so in the best way possible, but equally you want to show the organisation where you fit in with the organisation that you're currently employed. So yes, absolutely you can do that, no problem at all. I can see, Lara, as well, I've got a couple of questions here that I think have been sent to me privately, so
okay,
I can go through those when you're ready, if you don't have any more questions. Yeah?
No, that's fine, go for those, great.
Okay, great, that's fine. First question I can see here is, what happens if you don't know any fellows to sponsor you? Great question, thank you for asking it. That is not a problem. If you don't know any fellows currently within your own network, First port of call is normally to get in touch with your local IMechE committee, depending where you're based. So if, for example, you're in Glasgow, I'd suggest you get in touch with the Glasgow area committee, start to engage with them, see if somebody there can help you. If not, contact your local business development manager. So I get asked quite a lot to find sponsors for applicants, and that's normally not a problem at all. But a sponsor will agree to sponsor you having read your application. So you need to get the application ready. So don't for a moment be put off applying if you don't have a sponsor, because we can easily find a sponsor for you. But the sponsor will want to read your application. So I'd suggest you work on your draft application, get it ready to submit, and then when it's good to go, we can find a sponsor for you. I've also got a question here, Lara, from a chap who has said that he applied to IMechE for registration after working for quite a long period of time. He'd been working for about 30 years and has only got his CEng, I think, a year ago, wants to apply for fellowship now. Yeah, that's absolutely fine to do. It's all about having evidence of meeting the fellowship quality. So even though you only got elected to IMechE, you know, a month, 6 months, a year ago, yes, you can absolutely apply for fellowship, provided you've got enough evidence of meeting the fellow qualities. You wouldn't, for example, be able to apply for CEng if sort of off the top of my head, if, for example, you were a graduate who'd finished university, you'd been on an MPDS scheme, you just 4 years experience under your belt, and you got your CEng 6 months ago, you wouldn't suddenly now be able to apply for fellowship. Typically, if you've applied for CEng or IEng at an early stage in your career, you're typically looking, I would suggest, at between sort of 8 to 10 years before you'll have enough experience of moving up the career ladder and having enough experience to apply for fellowship. However, there are always exceptions to that rule. So it really depends on you as an individual and what you've been doing and what evidence you have of meeting the fellow qualities. That's really what it's all about.
Well, that's all the questions I had, Sandra. If there's any kind of like top tips or things as we draw to an end that you any insights you'd like to conclude with?
I can see I've just got another another question here saying that somebody hasn't done a lot of work in terms of promoting to the next generation of engineers. I think that is one of the essential qualities. So if it's something that you've not been doing, you'll need to look at how you can build up evidence of meeting that quality going forward before you're going to be able to submit a successful application. I think it's very much, and I think probably Lara, you'll agree, it's very much about looking at what the requirements are and then doing almost a brain dump of what you've been doing to date and how that maps against the requirements. And if you've got enough evidence, then start to compose a draft application. If you're unsure about how much evidence you have, then perhaps book a one-to-one with a member of the business development team and we'll be able to give you some guidance. And then you can put a plan of action going forward as to how you can work towards meeting the fellow qualities and submit a successful fellow application.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there, Sandra.
Well, I think it's fair to say thank you all very much for joining the session today. I do hope that it's been useful to you. Yes, you can all get a copy of the slide if you wish. That's no problem at all. I think that was a question that we asked you when you had to fill out the registration form for the session today. If you didn't do that and if you think now actually it would be quite useful to have a copy of these slides, just drop me an email. My email address is on the screen at the moment. It's just sandra.mulligan@imeche.org. If you do have any questions or queries after today, please don't hesitate to get in touch. We're here to help you and look forward to working with you to helping you achieve the goal of fellowship with IMechE. So thank you all very much and enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra, just one point. You know, Sandra, you produced those really useful links. I've tried to put those into the chat, but it didn't